Good evening, sir. I am P. Kaushik Raja from Humanities Department.
Yes.
My question is, caste system in earlier was seen as a factor that divides people on the basis of the work they do. Then the type of people who does a particular work is a part of it, which ultimately means that each type of work or job or labor is just a modern system of caste without the identity as a caste. So basically, if an individual wants to find his or her own identity, then he or she has to filter out certain factors that has been set up by the so-called system, the society. If one wants to identify who or she in every aspect, then it ends in a part where he or she is no one except an organism that is able to think. So why there is a need for an identity when there is a country that supports democracy, where even a poorest of the poor has the ability to become a president, since any identity leads to any division?
Any identity leads to any division. So let's kill religion altogether. If identity is the reason for discord in a community, then no form of identity should be alive. But the other side is coming out with even better arguments. Even gender identity, kill it completely. They've gone to the other extreme altogether now. The point I'm trying to make is, in fact today after my interaction at the IIT Research Park, one gentleman asked, I think, a very pertinent question, and that ties into your question. His point is, why do you need identity? What is the relevance of identity? Identity will survive as long as there is a sense of community and there is a concept of society, which you will never be able to do away with. You want an example from, let's say, Hindu argument? The day you become a sannyasi and you have given up all worldly ties, the need for identity ceases to exist. That's it, period. Right? Which means you're going into the forest. Vanaprastham is different from sannyasa, I agree. I'm generally saying you've decided to sever ties with the rest of the world. But as long as you choose to be a man of the world or the woman of the world or any other non-binary gender identity of the world, then identity is relevant. How can you fight for multiple gender identities and then say all other identities must be killed? If identity is irrelevant and it is the pernicious cause for everything that is divisive, why on earth are you fighting for 122 gender identities? It can't be your case that my case is more important than the other's case, and therefore my identity or the identity that I choose to focus on is more important than the identities that others choose to focus on. Then that means it's an investment of the ego, where you're saying that my position is more important. Not happening. Now coming to the second layer of the question, when people can aspire to be the president, why can't they aspire to move to other professions? I am consciously making the controversial statement that a profession and a vocation are not the same as traditions. I am making a clear distinction between secular vocation and traditional professions. These are different. Should they not be hereditary? I gave an example earlier, I think in one of my talks, and I'm saying this as much. Every time you have tried to non-hereditize a particular profession and convert that into a certification course, it has only translated to loss of quality and commitment. Because the personal investment is gone. The traditional pride is gone. There are two very good examples that I have come across in terms of at least anecdotal evidence, based on people who know better. Some people may be aware of the fact that I have worked with the former DGP of the idol wing, Sri Padmanabhaswamy, when it comes to idol theft cases. In the sense, when he needed to be defended against the rest of the police department, who were gunning him for identifying the crooks within the department, who were hand in glove with the smugglers of idols. And he basically said, in my experience, having handled so many cases, the theft of idols is more where there are non-hereditary archakas than hereditary archakas. That's across the board. Because they fear consequences if they do something which they are not supposed to, because the sacred covenant between them and the tradition is broken. They have nightmares. It's almost as if a member of the family is gone. It's just a profession, it's just a vocation. Your commitment is, I've done my job, I get a salary, that's the end of the matter. That's the same even with respect to the Sapati certification course. You don't understand that it's an entire way of life. It's not just a profession. It's like this. What we have chosen to do is that you have chosen to reduce a tradition to a skill set, which it is not. A skill set is replicable and acquirable, but a tradition needs to be inherited, or at the very least earned. Can a way of life be taught in a certification program? You need to be part of that particular environment. Does it start or end only with manners of prayer and whatnot? It starts with dietary restrictions. Why are dietary restrictions important? Let's bring in Brahmanism here. Let me address that question. You choose to divide dietary restrictions not on whether it's vegetarian or non-vegetarian. That's the Western binary way of looking at it. We focus on sattva, raja, guna. That is tamas. These are the three elements. Which means what you think of vegetarian can also be tamasic. That's not the distinction. We don't go with the distinction of whether it's vegetarian or non-vegetarian. So you basically say, I want to be able to tap into certain sattva elements of my consciousness, and therefore it starts with food. What you eat is what you become, is the basic philosophy. Why is it that Arnold Schwarzenegger suddenly says, I will stop eating red meat? I don't need to give a Western example for this, but unfortunately that's what seems to work. So I'm telling you this. Why is he saying this? I don't want to eat this. Because he is realizing the impact of red meat. Although Talib is in the news for the wrong reasons these days, for his trigger-happy tendency to block people on Twitter, one of his fantastic books that people must read is Anti-Fragile, where he is using Anti-Fragile as a concept to show the ability of a tradition to withstand the test of time. That argument he presents it with such evidence and with such brilliant first principles argument, no assumptions argument. Read that. And then apply all those so-called Western philosophies and arguments to our systems here. If a system is bound to die and has no utility, it will die its own organic death. There is nothing for you to do. It will go out of fashion. Or economics will do the job. But if a system continues to survive on fumes and despite the last gasps of breath coming out of it and saying, I'm not quitting this place, it is finding some value somewhere. But none of these arguments have any value until you have any faith in the metaphysics of our system. As long as you see it purely from a material perspective, none of it is going to make any sense whatsoever. Because then you don't understand the metaphysics imbued in every tradition in Bharat. From martial tradition to spiritual traditions to musical traditions, everything makes a difference. Unfortunately, that argument may not find purchase in a modern setting. But the argument that I'm trying to perhaps make is that there are serious limits of secular logic and secular rationality. And that some traditions cannot be understood through the realms of secular logic and secular rationality. It makes very little sense. Okay, you want a very unpopular example. Assume for a moment someone says, oh, how do you sit and believe immaculate conception? Or let's say that a particular prophet flew on a winged horse to the moon. I am not going to make fun of those beliefs whatsoever, under any circumstances. As a believer, I am not going to make fun of any of these beliefs. Simply because when it enters the realm of metaphysics, spirituality and belief, the order of logic changes, the nature of logic changes, the framework changes altogether. It's no more limited to sensory perception. I'm not concerned about what you believe in. I'm only going to ask, Arey bhai, what is the impact of your belief system on my existence? Am I going to live or die? Is my head on the roll going to be, is it going to be on the roll next? That is all I care about. I don't care about the kind of, let's say, figments of imagination or even reality that you wish to believe in. Not my problem, not my business, not my party, not my funeral. My only question then would be of, is it going to come in the way of my existence and my way of life in a place where I have lived for generations and millennia? That's the only question I'm interested in and nothing else. So when people on social media and others, let's say they indulge in making fun of other beliefs, Are you then going to be okay with your belief systems being, let's say, ridiculed on social media? Will you be comfortable with that? That's not the argument that you should be making. Nowhere can anybody find a simple example or even one example of me making fun of belief. In the realm of belief, both of you are either equally stupid or equally valid. That's how it works. Yes.